incentives. The U.S. says Beijing bankrolls its domestic chip firms, a violation of global trade agreements. And the Biden administration rolled out tighter restrictions on semiconductor manufacturing and exports, adding more than 24 Chinese companies to a trade blacklist to slow down China's military and technology capabilities. Jonathan, what about this and the dumping of chips?
Well, look, I mean, we have to keep the focus up on technology. I mean, this is important. You do not want them to have the ability to compete with us on artificial intelligence and other high-end aspects of 21st century technology. I think that has to remain a priority. And at the same time, I mean, yes, it's complete nonsense to hear this from Beijing. I mean, the Chips and Science Act put about $45 billion into our sector, whereas I've heard estimates on Chinese subsidization of its chip makers up to $200 billion. So their entire economy runs on subsidies. I mean, Robert Lighthizer original Section 301 case made totally clear how their economy works. I mean, how intellectual property theft, subsidization, and sort of import substitution, all of that comes together to create the industrial behemoth that we've seen. And we cannot have them, commodifying legacy chips that would create so much, so many problems across numerable sectors. We can't have that, and we can't have them, flooding our markets in this or any other goods. So again, we've got to continue to target the key sectors, make sure that they're not advancing. We have tons of tools to do that, and then we have to gain the upper hand of the trading relationship and make sure that they're not surpassing us with key technologies which feed into their military capacity, which, by the way, they're preparing to use in the Pacific. So that's obviously the other big piece of what we're going to do with China's strategy.
All right, great analysis as always from you, Jonathan. Thank you. We'll be watching all of this. So what are your priorities? I mean, yesterday we heard from Scott Bessent in his hearing talking about tariffs serving many purposes, as well as extending the tax cuts. From your standpoint, what's most important and needs to be in that bill? Putting border aside, I recognize border is your number one priority.
Border is a top priority, and the president's going to take steps on day one. We're going to follow with legislation on that, but making sure that we address inflation that has been just attacking the paychecks of so many hardworking American families, bringing down energy costs. This president needs help to make sure that we, as he said, drill baby drill. So across the country, we're becoming energy independent again. That's going to be a critical way to bring down inflation and impact prices to our grocery store at the pump and housing prices as well.
It seems like your colleagues on the left do not want to acknowledge what's going on in terms of the wide open border. 145 House Democrats voted against a bill to deport illegal migrants convicted of sex crimes. They are already convicted of sex crimes. They're against deporting them. The legislation passed yesterday in a vote of 274 to 145. All Republicans voted yes, and any illegal migrant who's convicted of or admits to sex crimes or domestic violence will also be deported and barred from entering the country again. Your thoughts? What went down yesterday?
It was shocking just to hear how radical the Democrats were behaving, and the rhetoric that we were hearing. They were defending, essentially being apologists for domestic abuse. So I was a domestic violence prosecutor when I was an attorney. I know these victims and their families. They do not want these abusers to stay where they can continue to abuse or put pressure on these victims to stay with them. So you need to deport these abusers. You need to make sure that the people in this country are not here illegally. And yes, that includes those who commit domestic acts of violence and violence against women.
Congressman, you've reintroduced the One Agency Act this week, which would consolidate federal antitrust enforcement within the Department of Justice's antitrust division. Tell us more about that, as I know DOJ is looking to cut agencies if it can.
Absolutely. You've got a lot of overlap between the FTC and their regulatory efforts in terms of antitrust and the DOJ and their ability to go after the strangling of marketplace control by single entities, whether it's in the healthcare industry, whether it's in the technology industry. The DOJ is the better place. They have more authority when it comes to criminal matters. So the FTC is duplicitous, and it should be actually rolled into the powers of the DOJ.
Congressman, before you go, I have a question on China. voucher from America that it said that it would.
Tax the rich more, they say. Oh, that's the solution. Just tax the rich even more, even though they're already paying most of what they earn and most of what they spend in tax. However, I think my response to this might surprise you. But first, some stats. Someone who earns 150 grand pays over 53 grand in tax. Someone who earns 25 grand pays barely over 2.5 grand in tax. So all those lefty, socialist benefit receivers who are saying tax the rich more, well, on 25 grand you're essentially paying 10% of your money in tax. So you're paying a lower percentage and you're only paying 2.5 grand. 150 grand, you're paying 53 grand, which is more than a third. So the rich are already taxed. Next stat, and then I'll tell you my surprising response to this, just because if you know me, you probably don't think I'm going to say what I'm going to say. So the top 1% generate 40% of the tax revenue, and the top 10% generate 70% of the tax revenue. So let's just be frank right here, right now. The problem is not the rich not paying enough tax. The problem is that poorer people are not paying enough tax either, because they don't pay much tax anyway. The problem is how the tax money is being used, how it's being spent, how it's being wasted, how it's being pilfered, and where it's going. Now, would you trust with $1 trillion of our tax money, our government to invest in wealth, or someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson to invest in wealth? Because I personally, let me know what you think, but I personally would trust an entrepreneur who's made billions. I would trust them to deploy and invest $1 trillion of the nation's tax money. I'd trust them much more than the government. The rich would invest in assets, build infrastructure, bring over companies, employ them, bring back the billionaires. They would incentivize other entrepreneurs. They would probably reduce taxes. They would probably increase subsidies. They would probably be able to increase the economy and generate more tax revenue by increased economy, not by just taking margins. Okay, now here's the thing that might surprise you about my answer to whether we should tax the rich more. I don't think we should tax the rich more, but I do think we should tax the super rich more. And I think there's a big difference. So the rich are probably, in the UK, if you earn 100 grand, you're rich. Apparently, even though you earn 150 grand, you're paying way more than a third of that in tax. So actually, the middle class, the upper working class, the small business owners, who generate most of the economy, small business generates 55% of all the national economy. They should be taxed less, much less. They're the ones who start the businesses, take the risk, employ the people, generate most of the revenue, pay for all the politicians and the civil servants. So they should be given breaks, reliefs, subsidies and support. They're doing this in Dubai, by the way. You're a creator, they want you to come over, they'll set up a studio for you, they'll give you a golden visa. Why aren't we doing this in the UK? So, the middle median rich, which is our rich, needs to be taxed way less. The super fucking rich need to be taxed more, but not too much. So, at the moment, many millionaires and billionaires are leaving the UK. In 2020 it was 2,500, then it kept doubling, and then it'll be in total about 20,000 by the end of 2025. And UBS are predicting by 2028 it'll be 500,000 millionaires left the UK. If that happens, the UK is even more fucked than it already is. I'm having daily conversations with people who hate the UK, who've lived here forever, who are patriotic, they want to leave, they want to go to Dubai. It's a nightmare. And what we've done is we've exiled the billionaires, exiled the Russian billionaires, the Chinese billionaires. We've exiled our own homegrown UK British billionaires. They've all moved to Monaco or Dubai or wherever else. And yes, these corporations have figured out a way around to pay no corporation tax. That needs to be stopped. So here's what we need to do, and surely this is just common sense. So the middle, median, average rich, upper working class rich, tax on them, get the start businesses, employ people, fire up that big engine of the economy that generates most of the revenue. Then we need to go for the billionaires in here, as we said, and say, look, come back, we'll give you this subsidy, we'll give you this support. You've got to pay some corp tax though, don't take the piss. Don't pay 0, don't pay 4, it's currently 25, I'll do you a deal, you can pay 10, come back. And do a fucking deal. Like, that's what Donald Trump did when he went in power, his last term. He pulled in Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and everything. He did a deal with them all. That's what entrepreneurialism is. Would you rather they paid 10 instead of 25, or nothing and left? Do them a deal. Anyway, thanks for leaving. So they're my thoughts. Number one, if the rich already pay loads of tax, let's not make enemies of the rich and exile them. Let's bring them all back. Let's make them pay some corp tax, but do them a deal, because they're bringing in trillions in revenue in this country, and they're creating tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. And then all of a sudden the economy goes like that, and then you don't have to thieve it all off of us in tax. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. But of course, you know, I wanted to reserve my judgment on Labour, you know, because I didn't think that the economy could have been any more damaged by the previous Conservative Party. And I thought, I'll let them, I won't judge them that they hate the rich and that they hate private schools, and that they hate success. I'll watch. But unfortunately, they've proven me right. They're taxing private schools into going bust and out of business. They're taxing entrepreneurs, they're taxing farmers. It's just outrageous. They're taxing landlords, they're taxing everyone. Oh, and ultimately, therefore, they're taxing the working class, which they say they're not. So look, I can rant and moan about this, and we should, by the way. I think you should share this and get this message out to as many people as possible. I will keep ranting about it, but I commit to giving you a solution at the end of every video. And so the solution on whether we tax the rich more is, well, you to become